Good morning. Glad your Monday is over with and into Tuesday now. And I hope everything went well for you yesterday. And today is off to a great start. We'll be digging back into the 17th Psalm this morning. Hopefully that'll help your day get started well because this is a psalm on how to have the care and the defense, um, excuse me, security from God. And so David has began again, as we said, this is a prayer more than as you see in verse 1, give ear unto my prayer. This is a prayer of David, not so much a song, but again a prayer. In fact, some versions of the Bible may even have above it in the superscription there that it is a prayer of David. Most likely, when he was fleeing from Saul, he was praying for security. And we looked in the first two verses. I think an important foundation. David prayed that God would protect him based on the fact that David was right or righteous, that he had done nothing to Saul, and yet Saul was trying to kill him. And so David prayed, just to sum up those words, God, I'm doing what's right, so you defend me. And important piece of our prayer life is, again, then that statement to be able to make sure that when we pray, that we are on the right, we're in the right. And so David does that. And the second thing, based on that, David then beginning now is going to call on God to protect him because he is right. He says, "I'm now going to call on you to protect me," and he's in the next section. And beginning in verse 3 this morning, we're going to kind of finish up where we were. David continues to talk about the fact that that he is right. He says, "You've proved my heart, visited me in the night." We saw that. And again, he says, You've tested me. You know that I'm right. He says, "I have kept me." And so he's leading up then to this statement where he's going to begin now in verse 6, saying, "Lord, I want you to protect me and to keep me safe." And so let's pick up there in verse 6 as we look at this psalm. David says, "I have called upon thee, for thou wilt hear me, O God. Incline thine ear unto me, and hear my speech." And so David, pretty again straightforward, he's crying out to God for shelter, for protection, and he says, "I've called you, and you will hear me." And so the first thing that we want to talk about this morning is David's, you could call it confidence, you could call it faith, whatever words you choose. But David says, based on the fact that of my position, that I am right, that I haven't done anything to Saul, that I haven't done anything to him. I'm calling on you, and I believe, as he says, you will hear me. That is a bold, confident prayer that David issues here, and there's I think a great lesson for us in that prayer is David balances between humility and boldness as he balances between those two to extremes. Reminds me of Ecclesiastes, a time to laugh and a time to cry. That David is balancing here between humility and boldness. He's placing himself in the hands of God, but he is also confident that his God will hear his prayer, and I think that's based on the fact that David, again, what David has been saying in those first 5 verses, he could be confident. You typically, you if you've ever let's use an illustration here. Maybe you've had to ask your manager. You went to ask your manager, your employer, for a pay raise. That's a little intimidating. On the other hand, a child has no qualms whatsoever about walking through a store, pointing at the most expensive thing in the store and saying, "Mama, can I have this?" Why is that? Because that child has a relationship with that mother. He's confident because she's been good to him. That child typically, is not going to ask for that item if he knows he's in trouble. But if he knows he's being good, if he's just come home with a report card, good report card, and he hadn't been getting in trouble at school, he hadn't been talking back to his mother, he's a lot more confident in making that request. "Mama, can I have a new bike? Mama," that kind of thing. And I think poorly that illustrates where David is. David has said, "God, I haven't done anything. I've tried to serve Saul. I've tried to be good to Saul. I've tried to serve you. And so I humbly believe, Lord, that you're going to hear my prayer." And so what I'd like for you to take away from that statement, that verse then, is that whole our idea of our life backing up our prayer life. A lot of people want to, live however they choose, and then be able to go boldly before God. They want to, make whatever decisions they want to live their life carefree, wild, sinfully, and then when they find themselves in a position of need, in a predicament, then they want to go and say, "Lord, I want to pray." I think we have in these two sections we've looked at, we have a great picture of the basis of a solid prayer life. A lot of us, myself included, I know people who, when they pray, it's just beautiful. They just string their words together in a way that just you think God's got to answer that. And I think what we see from David is it's not a matter of eloquent words. It's not a matter of praying beautiful, flowery word prayers, but David is basing his confidence on the life that he was living ahead of time. And I think the reverse side of that is the reason many people, their prayer life is weak, the reason they don't pray is because they know in their heart that the life they're living doesn't support the prayer they're praying. I hope that makes sense to you. And so David here, he says, "I'm calling on you and you will incline your ear to me." He says, "And hear my speech." David goes before God boldly. And we need to hear that and be working ourselves towards a life that we're able to go into God in our prayer life boldly, unashamedly, and to make our needs and our burdens known. Verse 7, he says, "Show thy marvelous loving kindness, O thou that savest by the right hand them which put their trust in thee, from those that rise up against them." He is asking God here to basically to prove himself, to show his great love as he saves those who trust in him. Show your marvelous works. You save it by the right hand with them which put their trust in thee. And David says, what David is saying is, I'm trusting you, Lord. I'm putting my confidence in you. I'm putting my refuge. I'm turning to you for safety, for refuge. Saul and his men, they have me surrounded. They are attacking, and I know that I can trust in you. Keep me as the apple of the eye. Hide me under the shadows of thy wings. And he goes on, hide me under the shadow of the wings from the wicked that oppress me, from my deadly enemies who compass me about. They are enclosed in their own fat. That might preach in a different way. With their mouth they speak proudly. They have now compassed us in our steps. They have set their eyes, bowing down to the earth, like as a lion that is greedy of his prey, and as it were a young lion lurking in secret places. David says, Lord, I love that picture. Hide me under the shadow of thy wings. I grew up. My father, some of you know, raised racing homing pigeons, and if you were to go into the pigeon house when they had when their eggs had hatched, many times you would walk through and you see a pigeon setting up on the nest, and you may not even realize that there was a baby in the nest with that mother. She would be sitting there, and all you would see is the mother pigeon, not quite that big, but you'd see the mother pigeon sitting there, but you didn't even realize that hidden under her wing was that little baby. Maybe only when you walk back through later and she didn't realize it or something, or the baby had shifted, you go, oh wow, and she's got a baby in there. You'd think she was just sitting on eggs or something, but then when you came back, she had that baby completely covered and protected under her wing, and that's the image for me anyway when I hear that, when David says, hide me under your wing, that total protection of that mother over her child. And so David begins to describe here. This is just a beautiful picture of the love of God. Again, he uses two phrases here when he talks about the apple of the eye. It's just the apple is the idea actually of a reflection. The word is actually it's kind of funny. It's translated as little man of the eye. And it's talking about the reflection you see when you're staring, the reflection you see in there when you're looking directly into the eyes of somebody, and so David is saying, I'm directly in your eye. I am you love me, and it just this beautiful description. Again, the apple of the eye, under the wing. You are protecting me from these my deadly enemies. He says, and he says they compass me about. They have him surrounded here. And one of the things I think this passage, this section describing the love of God reminds us of is that again, David was suffering. David was in this position because Saul was disobedient to God. Saul was jealous when he saw how much God loved David and that the people loved David, and so Saul set out to kill him. So again, David has done nothing wrong at this point, and so we need to remember that fact as well. That many times, when we're obedient to God, we're going to face adversity and the attacks of this world, and that we need to understand that. And don't again, I think about Job's friends who came to him and said, "Well, what have you done wrong?" This is a great prayer of David that reminds us that sometimes you're innocent. You've done everything you need to do. You've done what you should do, and therefore you've provoked the attack of the enemy. And so I think there's again two lessons for us to walk away with today. One of them is again, you can be living for you'd expect the attack of Satan when you try to live for God. But then the reverse side of that is to make sure that we're living for God. Make sure, like David, that we're able to go to Him. And I love those opening three words to David's prayer here. Hear the right. David says, Lord, I'm coming to you from a right place. I'm coming to you from a position of right. I haven't harmed Saul. I haven't done anything to Saul, and so Lord, I'm calling on you for your protection, and so I think that's a huge lesson for us this morning in our prayer life, is to be sure again that our life backs up our prayer. But don't be surprised that even when living right, if Satan attacks. Some of you today are going to need that, I'm afraid. You're going to be going through life today, and you're going to face adversity. You're going to face difficulty. You're going to face challenges. May even feel as David did, that you're surrounded by the enemy. Let me encourage you and just admonish you even. I don't use that word very often. To be certain that our life is right, just to simply use David's word, so that we can go to God in boldness and claim His protection. Hope you have a great day, and that God blesses your endeavors today. See you tomorrow.